I smoothed the hem of my cashmere sweater, watching the morning sun glint off the skyscrapers outside my apartment window. The city looked peaceful from up here, almost indifferent to the chaos that had once ruled my life. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the rich aroma anchor me, when my phone buzzed sharply against the marble countertop. A text from an unknown number. My heart tightened instantly. The words on the screen made me pause. "He's asking for you. He spent $47,000, and it didn't even matter. You need to know." I sank into my chair, fingers curling around the porcelain mug, trying not to let the tremor in my hands betray the storm beneath my calm exterior. Years of carefully built composure, of hiding the pieces of myself that could be broken, were suddenly confronting the memory of betrayal that had nearly shattered me. It was Michael, or rather, what he had become. The man who had promised forever, yet spent recklessly on a woman who wasn't me. I could almost feel the cold metal of the wedding ring he had tossed aside, and the sting of every lie, each luxurious gift that was never meant for our home, our life together. I took a deep breath, letting the calm I had forged over years settle back in. This wasn't about anger anymore. This was about reclaiming everything he thought he could take. I still remember the night it all began to crumble. I was 28, freshly married, and believing in a love that felt invincible. My apartment smelled faintly of vanilla candles, the soft hum of the city below like a lullaby. But inside, I felt a gnawing unease I couldn't yet name. Michael had been distant for weeks, late nights at work, excuses that never quite fit. My friends noticed. My sister, Claire, tried to warn me gently. Don't ignore that feeling. Trust yourself." I brushed her off, convinced I was imagining shadows in our happiness. The confrontation came unexpectedly. I found the first credit card statement he had hidden: lavish dinners, weekend getaways, gifts to a woman he claimed was just a colleague. My chest tightened as I flipped through the lines, each number a hammer striking the fragile foundation of my trust. I confronted him that evening. "Michael, who is she?" My voice trembled, the lump in my throat making it almost impossible to speak. He laughed, a sharp, bitter sound, like he thought it was a joke. "It's nothing. Stop overreacting." My hands shook, clutching the countertop, nails digging into my palms, heart racing like I could hear every beat echoing in the apartment. That night, I sat on the edge of our bed, clutching a small silver locket my grandmother had given me years before. "Emily," she had said, "you have everything inside you to rise, even if the world tries to break you." I held it tightly, feeling the engraved letters beneath my fingers. In that moment, I made a decision. I would not crumble. I would not be defined by his betrayal. I would stand on my own. The next morning, I began to plan, not revenge, but liberation. Every call, every meeting, every small step was a brick in the foundation of my independence. I didn't yet know how far I could go, but I knew I wouldn't look back. The first months after leaving Michael were the hardest. I moved into a small studio apartment in Brooklyn, a place far from the opulence he had flaunted. The walls were bare, save for the silver locket my grandmother had given me, hanging like a talisman above the bed. Every morning, I touched it and whispered a silent promise: "You will not break me." I threw myself into work, starting as an assistant at a boutique marketing firm. The hours were long, the pay modest, and the exhaustion real. Some nights, I would sit at my kitchen table, staring at the stack of bills, wondering if I had made a mistake by choosing independence over comfort. But then came small victories, a successful pitch, a compliment from my manager, a client who trusted me with a critical project. Each one was a tiny spark, lighting the path forward. It was during this time that I met Rachel, a seasoned strategist at the firm. She saw something in me I hadn't yet recognized myself. "Emily," she said over coffee one morning, "you have vision and people will follow it. Don't let anyone dim that." Her words were like fuel, igniting a fire I thought had burned out long ago. Under her mentorship, I learned to navigate the nuances of business, contracts, negotiations, client management, and more importantly, how to trust my own instincts. By the second year, I had launched a small consultancy on the side. Evenings and weekends became a blur of research, cold emails, and networking. Every small win, my first paying client, my first profitable project, was a reminder that I was reclaiming control over my life. I kept these victories quiet, updating friends and family with vague mentions of work projects, while quietly building a network that respected my talent, not my last name or my past. I also learned to savor the small, tactile reminders of my growth. The smell of fresh coffee in the morning, the feeling of my laptop warm against my wrists, the crisp pages of a newly signed contract. These moments became markers of my resilience, quiet celebrations of independence that no one could take from me. And yet, there was always a shadow lingering, Michael. His extravagance, his betrayal, the very thought of the $47,000 he had spent on her, it was a bitter reminder of why I had started this journey. But instead of fueling anger, it became a lesson in restraint. I would rise, not with vengeance, but with undeniable strength, showing the world, and him, that I was unstoppable. The invitation came unexpectedly. Michael had called, his voice hesitant, almost foreign. "Emily, can we meet? I think we need to talk." My heart beat faster, but not from fear, from anticipation. I agreed, setting the meeting at a high-end cafe in Manhattan, a place he had once promised to take me on a dream date. When he arrived, the same smug smile I remembered from our early years was plastered across his face. He expected hesitation, perhaps even weakness. I didn't give him the satisfaction. I walked in wearing a tailored blazer, designer heels, and the quiet confidence of someone who had rebuilt her entire world from scratch. We sat across from each other, and I let him speak first. He stumbled over words, awkwardly referencing the past, almost as if rehearsing an apology he couldn't deliver. Meanwhile, I watched him, really looked at him, and felt nothing but calm. Then I spoke. Slowly, deliberately. "Michael, do you remember the $47,000 you spent on her? The one you thought I'd never find out about?" His jaw tightened. I continued, letting my words land like carefully aimed strikes. "Because of that, our divorce settlement cost you $3.6 million. He froze. His eyes widened, disbelief etched across his face. "What, how?" I leaned back, allowing the elegance of my surroundings to speak before I added anything else. My office was modest but impeccable, marble desk, artful abstract paintings, a glass award glinting in the light. Not ostentatious, but unmistakably successful. I started my own consultancy. I worked nights, I sacrificed, I learned. And now I own multiple portfolios, my own business, and financial freedom you never imagined. All while you were busy trying to impress someone else. I paused, letting the truth settle in. Everything I have, I built. Without you. Without your money. Without your so-called love. The disbelief on his face was almost comical, if it weren't so deliciously satisfying. He looked around, eyes darting to the sleek design of my office, the visible markers of accomplishment he had once dismissed. "Emily." I shook my head gently, a soft, ironic smile on my lips. "No, don't speak. Just take it in." At that moment, I realized the power of silent triumph. The years of self-doubt, the sleepless nights, the relentless effort, all of it culminated in this. Not vengeance, but revelation. Not humiliation, but undeniable proof that I was unshakable. Michael left that day with a heavy heart and a deeper understanding than words could convey. He had lost, not just financially, but in every conceivable measure of respect and relevance in my life. After the initial shock of my revelation, I felt a calm clarity I hadn't experienced in years. Michael had expected confusion, tears, maybe even pleading. Instead, he was met with composure, a quiet authority that left no room for negotiation on my terms. "I'm done being defined by what others do to me," I said, my voice steady. "And I'm done allowing toxic patterns to exist in my life, especially from people who once claimed to care about me." He flinched slightly, a reminder that the tables had irrevocably turned. I continued, carefully outlining the boundaries I had established. You want to remain in my life, in any capacity? Then you need to understand 3 things. First, honesty. No more lies, no more hidden agendas. If you ever cross that line again, I walk away. Permanently. Second, respect. Respect my choices, my time, and my space. I built this life without you, and I will continue to thrive with or without your approval. Third, growth. I won't entertain anyone stuck in past patterns. You, like anyone else in my circle, need to reflect, learn, and move forward. As I spoke, I noticed subtle shifts in his posture, guilt, shame, and perhaps a flicker of admiration. It wasn't enough to restore what we lost, but it was enough for me. This was never about punishing him. It was about reclaiming my power and asserting the conditions that allowed me to flourish. Later, I extended these principles to others who had doubted or undermined me, family members, colleagues, even old friends. Each interaction was framed by a combination of compassion and firmness. I want you to succeed, I told my sister one evening over dinner. But you can't drag me back into old patterns of judgment or fear. You have to do the work too. The conditions were simple, yet transformative. No passive resentment, no reliance on excuses, and above all, no interference with my autonomy. I found that setting these boundaries didn't isolate me. Instead, it created a space where authentic relationships could thrive. By the end of that week, I realized something profound. True power isn't measured by wealth or revenge. It's measured by clarity, by the courage to enforce boundaries, and by the grace to allow others to either rise or step aside. I was no longer Emily Carter, the betrayed wife. I was Emily Harper, the woman who had taken her pain, forged it into strength, and created a life that no one could ever take away. Weeks later, I found myself in the quiet of my apartment, sunlight spilling across the hardwood floors. The city buzzed below, oblivious to the triumphs and trials that had shaped my life. I held the silver locket my grandmother had given me all those years ago, tracing the engraved letters with my fingers. It had been my anchor, my reminder that I was capable of rising above anything, even betrayal. I thought of Michael, of the disbelief in his eyes, of the lessons etched into every sleepless night I had endured. I didn't feel hatred anymore, just a quiet satisfaction. He had been a catalyst, not a shackle. The $47,000 he had squandered on his mistress was trivial in comparison to the wealth of resilience and independence I had built for myself. The $3.6 million settlement? A confirmation that my life, my decisions, and my self-worth were never to be underestimated. Even my relationships with family and friends had shifted. My sister, once cautious and doubtful, now sought my advice, inspired by the strength I had cultivated. My colleagues, who had once questioned my abilities, now regarded me with respect and genuine admiration. I had set boundaries that protected my peace, yet invited growth and authenticity. As I sipped my coffee, the aroma filling the kitchen, I realized something profound. Empowerment isn't about revenge, wealth, or making someone pay. It's about recognizing your own worth, cultivating your own success, and allowing the people who matter to rise alongside you, or choose to walk away. I smiled softly at my reflection in the window, sunlight catching the edges of my eyes. Emily Harper, a name I had claimed for myself, a life I had forged from heartache and determination. I felt the calm certainty of someone who had endured, who had learned, and who had chosen herself above all else. And in that quiet, victorious moment, I whispered to no one in particular, yet to the world at large. I am unbreakable, unapologetically me, and no one will ever take that away.